Six barred. I was standing at the gate that divided the base from the outside world. The guard who checked my ID raised his eyebrows doubtfully. There was an extra layer of security on the base thanks to the U.S. crew's visit. Although the Japanese corps oversaw general base security, the balance of power with the U.S. prevented them from interfering with anything under U.S. jurisdiction. Luckily, U.S. security didn't have any interest in anyone that wasn't one of their own. Without leave papers from a commanding officer, Keiji Korea wasn't getting off the base, but the U.S. soldiers could come and go as they pleased, and all they had to do was flash an ID. Everyone used the same gate, so if I got an American guard, he might let me through, no questions asked. All they cared about was keeping undesirables away from their precious Special Forces squad. A recruit trying to go AWOL wasn't likely to catch their eye. The guard must not have seen many Japanese ID cards, because he stared at mine for a long time. The machine that checked IDs just logged who passed through the gate. No need to panic. Why would they change the system up the day before an attack? The muscles in my stomach tensed. The guard was looking back and forth between me and my card, comparing the blurry picture with my face. The cut on my temple burned. The sawbones who tended to me in the infirmary gave me 3 stitches without any painkiller. Now was sending searing bolts of electricity shooting through my body. The bones in my knee creaked. I was unarmed. I missed my knife, warm and snug under my pillow. If I had it with me, I could lock this guy in a half Nelson, and thinking like that wasn't going to get me anywhere. I stretched my back. Gotta stay cool. If he stares at you, stare right back. Stifling a yawn, the guard pressed the button to open the gate. The doorway to freedom creaked open. I turned slowly to look back as I slipped past the yellow bar. There in the distance was the training field. The sea breeze, heavy with the scent of the ocean, blew across the field toward the gate. On the other side of the fence, soldiers the size of ants performed tiny miniature squats. They were the soldiers I'd eaten with and trained with. They were my friends in the 17th. I swallowed the nostalgia that rose up in me. I walked, unhurried, the moist wind blowing against my body. Keep walking until you come out of sight of the guard. Don't run. Just a little farther. Turn the corner. I broke into a sprint. Once I started running, I didn't stop. It was 15 clicks from the base to Tateyama, a nearby entertainment district. Even if I took a roundabout route, it would be 20 clicks at most. Once I was there, I could change my clothes and lay in the supplies I needed. I couldn't risk trains or the highway, but once I hit Chiba City, I would be home free. Neither the army nor the police stuck their noses, and the underground malls turned slums there. It was about 8 hours until Squad 1830's meeting. And that's when they probably figured out I'd gone AWOL. I didn't know if they'd send cars or choppers after me, but by dusk, I planned to be just another face in the crowd. I remember the training we'd done at the foot of Mount Fuji, 60-kilometer marches in full gear. Crossing the Bozo Peninsula in half a day wouldn't be a problem. By the time tomorrow's battle started, I'd be far away from days that repeat themselves in the brutal death they ended in. The sun hung high in the sky, washing me in blinding light. 57mm automatic guns sat covered in white tarps at 100-meter intervals along the seawall. Red-brown streaks of rust marred the antique steel plates at their base. The guns had been installed along the entire coastline when the mimics reached the mainland. As a kid, When I'd first laid eyes on those guns, I thought they were the coolest things I'd ever seen. The black lacquer finish of their steel instilled an unreasonable sense of confidence in me. Now that I'd seen real battle, I knew with cool certainty that weapons like these could never repel a mimic attack. These guns moved like the dinosaurs they were. They couldn't have delayed a hit on a mimic. What a joke. They still had service crews assigned to these. I came out and inspected them once a week. Bureaucracy loves waste. Maybe humanity would lose. The thought came to me out of the blue, but I couldn't shake it. Page break indicated by a small pattern. When I told my parents I'd enlisted, they wanted me to join the Coast Guard. They said I'd still get a chance to fight without going into battle. That I'd be performing the vital task of defending the cities where people worked and lived. But I didn't want to fight the mimics to save humanity. I'd seen my fill of that in the movies. I could search my soul till my body fell to the dust around it, and I'd never find the desire to do great things like saving the human race. What I found instead was a wire puzzle you couldn't solve no matter how many times you tried. Something buried under a pile of puzzle pieces that didn't fit. It pissed me off. I was weak. I couldn't even get the woman I loved, the librarian, to look me in the eye. I thought the irresistible tide of war would change me, forge me into something that worked. I may have fooled myself into believing I'd find the last piece of the puzzle I needed to complete Keiji Korea on the battlefield. But I never wanted to be a hero, loved by millions, not for a minute. If I could convince the few friends I had that I was someone who could do something in this world, who could leave a mark, no matter how small, that would be enough. And look where that got me. What had half a year of training done for me? I now possessed a handful of skills that weren't good for shit in a real battle, and six-pack abs. I was still weak, and the world was still screwed. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry. It took me this long to realize the obvious. Ironic that I had to run away from the army before I figured it out. Page break indicated by a small pattern. The beach was deserted. The Coast Guard must have been evacuating this place over the past 6 months. After a little less than an hour of running, I planted myself on the edge of the seawall. I'd covered about 8 kilometers, putting me about halfway to Tateyama. My sand-colored shirt was dark with sweat. The gauze wrapped around my head was coming loose. A gentle sea breeze, refreshing after that hot wind that had swept across the base, caressed the back of my neck. If it weren't for the machine guns, props stolen from some long-forgotten anime, intruding on the real world, it would have been the very picture of a tropical resort. The beach was littered with the husks of spent firework rockets, the crude kind you put together and launch with a plastic tube. No one would be crazy enough to come this close to a military base to set off fireworks. They must have been left by some bastard on the feed trying to warn the mimics about the attack on Bozo Peninsula. There were anti-war activists out there who were convinced the mimics were intelligent creatures, and they were trying to open a line of communication with them in Democracy Grand. Thanks to global warming, this whole strip of beach was below sea level when the tide came in. By dusk, these screwed-up tubes would be washed away by the sea and forgotten. No one would ever know. I kicked one of the melted tubes as hard as I could. Well, what's this? A soldier? I spun around. It had been a while since I'd heard anyone speak Japanese. I'd been so lost in my thoughts I didn't realize anyone had come up behind me. Two figures, an elderly man and a little girl, stood atop the embankment. The old man's skin would have made fine pickle brine if you set it out in a jar on a bright day like today. In his left hand, he clutched a three-pronged metal spear right out of a fairy tale. What's he doing with a trident? The girl. She looked about the right age to be in elementary school. Squeezed his right hand tightly. Half hidden behind the man's leg, the girl looked up at me unabashedly from under her straw hat. The face beneath the hat was too wide to have spent much time cooking under the sun. You're an unfamiliar face. I'm from the Flower Line base. Damn it, I'd run my mouth before my brain. Sea has fish wanting to be caught. Families all gone up to Tokyo. What happened to the Coast Guard? Whitcomb built the Wap and we took down in Okinawa. Why, they all up and left. If the army can take care of them croakers for us, we'd breathe easier, that's for sure. Yeah. Croakers was obviously some local slang for mimics. Ordinary people never got the chance to see a mimic with their own eyes. At best they catch a glimpse of a rotting corpse washed up on the beach. Or maybe one that had gotten caught in a fishing net and died. But with conductive sand washed away by the ocean, all that would remain would be empty husks. That's why a lot of people thought mimics were some type of amphibian that shedded skin. I only caught about 70% of what the old man said, but I heard enough to know that the Coast Guard had pulled out of the area. Our defeat at Okinawa must have been more serious than I thought. Bad enough for them to recall our combined forces up and down the Ichibo line. Everyone had been redeployed with a focus on major cities and industrial areas. The old man smiled and nodded. The girl watched him with eyes wide as saucers, witness to some rare spectacle. He put a lot of hope in the UDF troops stationed at Flower Line Base. Not that I had signed up to defend him or anyone else for that matter. Still, it made me feel bad. You got any smoke, son? Since the military left, can hardly come by any. Sorry, I don't smoke. Then don't you worry none. The old man stared out at the sea. There weren't many soldiers in the armored infantry who suffered from nicotine addiction. Probably because you couldn't smoke during battle, when you needed it the most. I stood silent. I didn't want to do or say anything stupid. I couldn't let him find out I was a deserter. They shot deserters. Escaping the mimics just to be killed by the army didn't make much sense. The girl tugged at the old man's arm. She tires out real easy. Good eyes on her, though. Being born a boy, she'd have been quite a fisherman. Yeah. Just one thing before I go. Ain't never seen anything like this. Came running up my house quick as I might, found you here. What you make of it? Anything to do with them croakers? He raised his arm. My eyes followed the gnarled twigs of his fingers as he pointed. The water had turned green. Not the emerald green you'd see off the shore of some island in the South Pacific, but a frothy turbid green. Eyebrows still knitted. The old man's head traced an arc as it sailed through the sky. The shattered pieces of his jaw and neck painted the girl's straw hat a vivid red. She didn't realize what had happened. A javelin exits the mimic's body at 1,200 meters per second. The old man's skull went flying before the sound of the javelin had even reached us. She slowly looked up. A second round sliced through the air. Before her large, dark eyes could take in the sight of her slain grandfather, the javelin ripped through her. an act of neither mercy nor spite. Her small body was obliterated, buffeted by the blast. The old man's headless body swayed. Half his body was stained a deep scarlet. The straw hat spun on the wind. My body recoiled. I couldn't move. A bloated frog corpse stood at the water's edge. This coast was definitely within the UDF defense perimeter. I hadn't heard reports of any patrol boats being sunk. The base on the front was alive and well. There couldn't be any mimics here. I claimed the two corpses lying beside me would surely have contested if they could. But they were dead, right before my eyes. And I, their one hope for defense, had just deserted the only military unit in the area capable of holding back this invasion. I was unarmed. My knife, my gun, my jacket. They were all back at the base. When I'd walked through that gate an hour ago, I'd left my only hope for defense behind. 30 meters to the near 57mm gun. Within running distance, I knew how to fire one, but there was still the tarp to deal with. I'd never have time to get it off. Insert my ID card into the platform, key in my passcode, feed in a 30-kilometer ammo belt, release the rotation lock lever or the barrel won't move and I can't aim. Climb into the seat, crank the rusted handle, screw it. Fire, mother effer, fire. I knew the power of a mimic. They weighed several times as much as a fully geared jacket jockey. Structurally, they had a lot in common with a starfish. There was an endoskeleton just below the skin, and it took 50mm armor-piercing rounds or better to penetrate it. And they didn't hold back just because a man was unarmed. They rolled right through you like a rototiller through a gopher mound. F me. The first javelin pierced my thigh. The second opened a gaping wound in my back. I was too busy trying to keep down the organs that came gurgling up into my throat to even notice the third. I blacked out. 6-part end.